early push by the Terran. Obviously, if there was an early push, say there was a tank push with a handful of Marines early on by the Terran player, if the Terran player had gone too fat, even with tanks and say a couple of vultures, he would have probably felt that he would, with his shuttle and reaver, he would have A, been able to harass his opponent, or B, been able to stave off that early push while he switched to carriers, and maybe that's why he went for the reavers. I mean, do you think that was, I mean, why do you think Bisu went for the shuttle and reaver and then did not do any harass at all on XellOs? Diggity, do you feel that there was some sort of, whether it was purely defensive or whether it was also in anticipation?
I think you're dead on about using that Reaver, a la, I guess I saw Stork absolutely save a game where he only had a Reaver and a dropship and ended up, I think that was in last season's
It was
OSL. I'm not
Flash.
positive about that. Yeah, against Flash, and it was some brilliant Reaver micro, and I think obviously Stork, like we were talking about the difference during that OSL match, that Bisu's extremely just brilliant with his Reaver micro, figuring, yeah, I can stop a rush with that. That might be why he was pushing out with that Reaver. I think once he saw that Wraith, I think that's when he decided to pull back. XellOs did a lot of damage on that drop shuttle, leaving it very weak. And if there was another Wraith in the area, another Goliath, that's a lot to use. And really, he was going to need that shuttle later, just in case there was actually a push from XellOs coming. And I think that Wraith made the difference, which is why I'm encouraging more Terran players just to build a single Wraith. You got to get your starport and your science facility to push upgrades anyway. I think it's worth the investment, but I'm sure a lot of people argue with me on that. But yeah, pushing up, I think that was more. I think XellOs was actually building that Wraith initially, maybe for that reason, but I think he was also pushing it up to get information. And so that really played into Bisu's favor ultimately, but we'll see. I guess there could be some argument about that.
Right, Bisu did get fairly lucky with countering that Wraith. He managed to take it out just with the last shot of his Dragoon. But I think the Wraith came out fairly late in the day, because by the stage the Wraith was actually wandering towards Bisu's main. XellOs' dropship had already been and gone with his first kind of vulture drop, where he was trying to drop the vultures, was warded off by Bisu's 3 goons, and he found the front door closed as well, and a couple of reaver shots went off. So I think the question remains, with regards to Bisu's harass, was his reaver mainly a defensive investment, Moletrap? Because I still feel there was more than enough time for Bisu to have gotten a couple of harasses off, since XellOs did go for the dropship first. Was Bisu purely defense-minded with the fast carriers in mind, with that Reaver build? And should XellOs have been able to extrapolate from that Moletrap? I keep coming back to this question.
Uh, I guess it's possible he could extrapolate, but I really don't see how he could have known for sure. I
I mean,
don't
was
know.
he defense-minded with the Reaver, though?
I
Do you
yeah,
feel
I
Bisu
do
was
think
defense-minded?
I do think it was defense minded. I think maybe that. Well, I mean, obviously he was sending out his. It looked like he was sending out that shuttle to maybe do some harassment. We'll never know, I guess. But whether or not it was, he had that in mind. He definitely used it for defense. Although the way things worked out in that, I think it probably was deliberate. I think it probably was a deliberate defensive Reaver, and I mean it did, hold off those vultures that tried to come into his base that one time, and he used the Reaver to try and hold off those tanks as well. And yeah, by the way, I did notice actually he did drop the Reaver out before the shuttle died, but it popped immediately on impact because of the tanks. Just as I thought that was funny.
Okay,
Yeah, I
that's
think
a good spot. I didn't notice that. I didn't think the Reaver did any damage there. But sorry, go
he
ahead. I'll
didn't even
let you
get a
finish your
scare
point
above.
there.
Oh no, that was I do think it. I don't know if it would. How about I actually say something instead of changing thought about 5 times in a half second? I do think that it was defense minded. I'm pretty sure it was deliberate for defense. It looked like he might have been moving out to try and maybe do a little harassment since he had it, and since he wasn't getting pushed on. But then I'm pretty sure that's why he had it in the first place. It's hard to tell. It could have just been that he went for his normal build and then said, screw it, let's get some carriers. I'm drunk anyways.
I doubt that, but I think that the Bisu strategy was definitely an interesting one to boot. The other thing that I'm thinking about the Reaver build was, could it also have been deception and mind games? I mean, clearly you don't typically expect a Terran to get an academy and a comsat up, but he did position that robotics facility and his robotic support bay near to his main. So any initial scout, possibly by his opponent, would have led them to perhaps see the robotics facility and conclude that, if there was an early scout, if say XellOs managed to get another SCV in or something else in, or Vulture in early on, before Bisu could get that blockade up, then he would have just probably seen the robotics facility and gone, oh, okay, I know what this guy's doing. He's going for a standard build, and that would throw him off the scent of the carriers. I mean, do you think that would have? I mean, I don't think that was a factor in this game, but do you think that was one of the things that was going through Bisu's mind, Diggity?
Well, actually, no. Let me reprocess this for a second. I'm trying to go back through the map and think. Well, specifically going, I guess, technically back a topic with the Reaver. I think the key thing about the Reaver is the Reaver harass really opens up when you have two bases to shuttle between. I think he was expecting XellOs to definitely go for that fast expand, as most Terran do. When XellOs did not, that kind of neutralized that Reaver. The Reaver can only go to one location. It's much easier to deal with. Maybe XellOs did that, in fact, just kind of a mind game against Bisu, knowing that Bisu was probably going to go Reaver. Interestingly enough, though, yeah, Bisu, I'm surprised he didn't use that Reaver more often, and as soon as he saw that starport go down, he immediately built the gate and immediately went into carriers, which is what really kind of confused me about that. Maybe he just, obviously being the programmer that he is, knows something different than I do in particular. Maybe you guys can comment that as well. But really, yeah, it seemed like he did a really early dedication to get the Reavers out quickly, and I think that was denied because there was no secondary yet. And then immediately turned around and went straight into Reavers. I think that, or right into carriers. I think that was his backup plan. And but what confuses me is on the other side, XellOs went for the dropship. The dropship was coming out not super late, but decently late. And really, I'm not sure what he was expecting to do with that necessarily. Maybe get some vultures in the base. I know he pushed up initially. I think it was with tanks. But when you have that, I guess he was hoping that Bisu was going to go fast expand as well. And it was kind of the exact same situation where, because that second base wasn't up, because Bisu had gone with that Reaver first, it's easy to take care of. And honestly, can't really use a Reaver defensively against a drop shuttle. He definitely had the goons in position to deal with it. It was just an odd game altogether. It was just kind of a little bit back and forth, and I think both players, because they didn't take that initial fast expansion, both players were kind of thrown for a loop, but Bisu obviously winning out because he adjusted the best and the fastest, and by the time XellOs came around and realized what was happening, he just didn't... he started the push, but again, it was about 30 seconds to a minute too late.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there, Diggity. And maybe we're giving too much credit for advanced planning. Maybe it was more adaptation and on-the-fly change of strategy and backup plans, as opposed to the original builds that actually decided the outcome of the game. But on the question of the fast expand, did Bisu actually get his scout off? Because I wasn't sure if his first probe actually got through the Marines, because I think XellOs had 2 Marines out on the top of his ramp before Bisu's probe actually got there. We saw XellOs' SCV in Bisu's base, but I didn't see Bisu's probe in XellOs' base. So just seeing those 2 Marines, Moletrap, do you think that Bisu had the scout, knew that fast expansion wasn't up before? I mean, he obviously had his observers out, so possibly by the time his Reaver actually popped, his observer was already in XellOs' base. But do you think that was what the case was, Moletrap, that Bisu, first of all, even if he didn't get the probe scout, the moment he saw that the expansion wasn't up, he decided to keep his Reaver home and decided to adapt by switching to carrier tech, realizing that he probably felt he had enough to defend against what XellOs had?
Well, I'm actually rewatching it right now, and he did not get a scout in with his initial probe, so he did not get any scout on XellOs base basically until those observers were up.
Right, that's what I was thinking, because I didn't think the probe got through. I know we didn't remark on it at the time. I don't think we got a chance to, but that's what I was thinking at the time, that the probe didn't actually get in, and I thought that was very significant that XellOs got the scout and knew Bisu wasn't fast expanding, whereas Bisu didn't have the scout. And yet, despite that, Bisu managed to make the right decisions and XellOs made the wrong decisions. But again, I'm going to come back to that question about the adaptation versus the original strategy. Do you think it was that he was originally going to use the Reavers for defense and always going to go carriers anyway, or do you think that was his adaptation, that he just adapted on the fly, which would actually bode very well for Bisu's future this season? Moletrap?
I am leaning still towards the fact, or the possibility that it was deliberate. I think it was a deliberate build, but it's also a possibility that, I mean, you see the Protoss go carriers when they have an economic advantage. Basically, they can't. It's really difficult for them to kind of. People do these days, actually. Like Diggity was saying, a lot of Protoss have been going carriers pretty quick for no reason at all. but usually you see him go for when they have that economic advantage. And he did scout out after he had the robotics facility and all that. He did scout out that starport, and so he thought that he knew he was going to be able to hold off that drop, and he knew that XellOs had spent a little bit of money on the starport and the control tower and the dropship and the vultures and everything. So maybe he thought that he had enough of a little bit of an economic lead to invest in those couple stargates as a counter. It is a possibility that that was a kind of an adaptation of that sort. I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt. I
interesting.
wanted to chime in just a second.
Go ahead,
Actually, I just realized as soon as that starport goes down, the signal that's sent to Bisu is there's not that's resources that were not going towards a factory, and because he knew the resources weren't going towards a factory and basically ground unit production, I think that's why he immediately switched into the carrier build, because as a result he knew he wasn't going to get pushed on before he could get the carriers out. So timing being a little bit of an issue there, and maybe that's giving a little bit too much credit to Bisu, but I think that actually is a viable explanation. That's why that's what was really interesting to me is as soon as he had the observer scouting out that starport, he immediately went into carriers before he even had that third expansion.
No,
and,
actually,
and I think that might have.
He put up his Stargate before. He's put up his Stargate before he scouted the starport.
Okay, well.
All right, never mind then.
That
So
kind of relishes that
completely.
No, I mean I'm rewatching
nice.
it right now, and he put it up before his observer even got to XellOs' base.
Okay. Well,
Wow.
I still
Alright,
think Bisu's adaptation, as Diggity pointed out, was quite brilliant, and it does seem to show that he is at least more on top of his game than XellOs is. But before I switch over to discussing XellOs' mistakes or whatever and whatnot in this game, I want to ask you guys about the general Protoss strategy in terms of and the general Terran strategy in terms of this map. We've seen now a few times, as Diggity has mentioned, the strategy with the fast carriers. How much does this change the dynamic, this map, Katrina, where you can wall off your basically your natural, your main, and therefore hide your tech so effectively? On most maps where you have a natural expansion, it's not so easy to hide your tech as it seems to be on this map, and still you don't mean hide your tech and still fast expand and still defend, if you know what I mean. So the fact that Terran players tend to fast expand on this map does leave them a little bit vulnerable to that fast carrier tech, because by the time they get everything running and going, and even though XellOs didn't fast expand, he was still caught up by the carriers. So, I mean, what do you guys think of the dynamic of the fact that obviously Terrans don't typically get comsats versus Protoss players, and the ability to hide carriers in that base, and the difficulty of a Terran to actually get a scout in there? Diggity.
Well, I've seen a lot of Protoss players, or I'm sorry, Terran players get the comsat out fairly early, but yeah, I agree. It's definitely the fact you can blockade and deny that information so easily, that definitely does play a big factor in the Protoss versus Terran matchup on this map. I thought it was going to play, actually, because if you can get that early Terran wall, I thought that would play a bigger factor when you were up with the Terran versus Zerg matchup, simply because I feel like anything that minimizes the early game is not very favorable for Zerg players. Maybe that'll prove to be true actually in the long run, but obviously looking even right now. Actually, I've been really impressed on how Zerg have innovated this match, but I'm not going to get off topic here. Protoss players, though, yeah, they can do a lot of things on this map. They can hide the tech, they can press forward. If they just assume that that second expansion is going to be taken, that Reaver harass, as well as even a Dark Templar harass, becomes really viable. And I think it's because of that Dark Templar harass, you'll see the turrets go down. And that's what really surprised me is it still throws me off why XellOs didn't take that expansion. Usually it's kind of the free given. Maybe he did it just to throw Bisu off, but obviously didn't end up working out for him. I'm just really surprised by it. I expected him, if he wasn't going to take that second expansion, just to go straight into a 2-factory build, but instead it seemed like he went to factory, and then much later decided and did kind of like an initial push again, and then Bisu had the 3 Dragoons out. I guess maybe it was more fortunate for Bisu, because I think initially Bisu's what Bisu was thinking is he was just assuming that XellOs was going to fast expand. He was producing 3 Dragoons to go and do a quick push. XellOs, in fact, was hoping to do a quick push, and if that didn't work, go for the expansion at that point. Who knows? Anyway, but yeah, getting back down to it, yeah, I do think information denial plays just a vital role in this matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, in the next OSL or a couple series down the road, we're not going to see Katrina anymore, because whatever the reason is, Protoss are absolutely dominating on this match, on this map specifically.
Yeah, very lackluster performance by XellOs there. And I'm going to come back to Moletrap with that point that Diggity made. He didn't go for the fast expansion, and yet he didn't push. What the hell was he trying to do, Moletrap? I mean, should he have done one or the other?
You're talking about XellOs?
Yep.
Yeah, I think basically his timing was just off. He kind of looked like he was preparing for a push, but as we've stated before, he made his push a little bit too late, and Bisu had the carriers out. If he'd pushed before those carriers a little bit earlier, I think he could have done some good. If he'd stayed back and gotten more Goliaths before pushing, that might have worked as well, but he kind of didn't do either. I think it mostly kind of came down to the timing of it. It looked like he may have also been going for more of a long-term game as well initially, because he did, when he finally got pushed back to his base, he did have 2 command centers up that he didn't have before, so he may have been thinking that Bisu was not going to attack so quickly with just a few carriers, and maybe he was going to be able to just kind of keep Bisu occupied while he expanded and win in a more long-term game, and he didn't anticipate Bisu moving out anymore. I don't know. You guys can discuss that more if you like, but I have to go do some damn homework. So talk amongst yourselves. I'm sorry.
All right, Moletrap. We're gonna finish off this discussion without you. Actually, we need you to finish recording it, I think. But
I'll keep recording, but stop. I'm gonna.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Because there are a couple more points that I do want to address with Diggity before we close this off. Even though we have been rambling for a while. The last question I actually wanted to come back to, Diggity, before we actually switch to the actual late game. I know I've been saying this for a while. Last question. XellOs. The fact that, I mean, should XellOs have had an academy and a comsat up? I think, if we look at the amount of information that XellOs had, he knew that Bisu had not got a scout into his base early on in the game. Bisu did not get that probe in. He blocked the probe. So Bisu did not know whether or not XellOs had a fast expansion. B, XellOs did know that Bisu did not have a fast expansion and therefore was teching up earlier on. So the question is, when he did not see that harass coming, because for all Bisu knew, XellOs had fast expanded, and that's what he would have anticipated Bisu would have thought. So when he did not see that harass coming from Bisu, he seemed to then decide to go for the starport to maybe try and get some sort of scout in, and maybe that's why he did that. But I mean, when you had those 2 factors, with Bisu not being able to get the scout into XellOs' base, and XellOs obviously having gone for that fast kind of push type build, what should he have done? Why did he not do anything? He didn't make really any effort till quite late on to actually get a scout off from Bisu's base to see exactly what Bisu was up to, and didn't really seem to he just seemed to sit there and let Bisu do whatever, walled off behind his choke. What was up with that, Diggity?
Yeah, I don't know. Initially, it looked like he was trying to hedge his bets, and in hedging his bets in all directions, he ended up accomplishing nothing, essentially. He went through, he saw that the secondary wasn't up, so he knew that there was some sort of faster tech build coming in his direction, and his reaction to that was to try to get ahead economically. But what kind of confuses me about that is he tried to get ahead economically, and I guess what he was trying to do is get ahead economically, put down that secondary, and then supplement that with the single Wraith, and having that Wraith basically defend him against the Reaver harass. And I think that was some degree of a mistake. I don't think he was counting on Bisu at that point immediately adjusting and getting his economy up as well. Nevertheless, and I definitely don't think he was expecting carriers at that point. And I think that was a really good calculation on Bisu's part. I think understanding XellOs' thought process through that he was going to try to out-tech him and out-push him in the long run. And maybe that is why at that point he's like, okay, well, I don't have any information. I've been scouted. Well, I'm not sure. I think he did have... No, he didn't. That's right. He didn't have the obs in the base yet. I think that's immediately why he went obs, is because he really wanted that information. Bisu does not play well in the dark. Most of the matches you see him lose in a poor fashion, it's because he was playing in the dark. But yeah, as a result, just switching straight to carries because he knew he wanted to end it quickly. He didn't want to, because he was behind economically at the end there. Didn't want to get out pushed. Didn't want to have a timing push. And I think he was relying on the Reavers at the end just for that timing push. So things working out for Bisu in the end.
Right, and sorry, I lost the thread of my thought there for a second. But yeah, obviously the scouting information seems to be a big deciding factor in the game, and you're right, XellOs being a jack of all trades there and master of none. But was it the fact that he saw that Bisu had fast expanded, and therefore from that calculated and anticipated a Reaver harass, and is that what stopped him from pushing out with his initial force, feeling that he had to keep his units back to defend against Bisu's shuttle harass, anticipating that it would arrive a lot sooner than it did?
I think he actually got greedy and thought he, instead of pushing forward, he would just try to win the long-term economic game. I think the better option obviously would have been to push. Really, to do it front to back, I think this is the line of logic that was happening. XellOs recently lost to Jangbi, who did a fast expand. XellOs didn't want to lose to a fast expand again, so he set himself up to do a 2-factory build. However, when Bisu didn't get the scout on his base, and when he scouted and saw the fast expand didn't come, he was kind of like, oh well, there goes my plan. So I know he's going for tech, and I can be economically ahead at this point. So he goes for the economic to basically go economically ahead, and Bisu's immediate reaction to that, obviously, going carriers, and I think there was an opportunity there for XellOs to win it, but just couldn't seal it. I think he needed to either just start pumping wraiths. Obviously, not. I don't think he would have had enough wraiths out at that point, and just way too expensive at that point as well. But really, I think he should have been pumping Goliath a lot sooner. But I think he was pumping more tanks because he's thinking, I need to do my time push now. Make sure that third expansion doesn't go up, and then as soon as that third expansion is taken down, just continue to push on Bisu's base. Bisu got a little bit lucky there, I think, because he had those carriers out just in the nick of time. Not necessarily luck, I guess, pro-gaming timing. Bisu timing, when you're good, I guess luck follows. But razor-thin match there, actually, in retrospect. If those carriers had not been out at that point, Bisu would have lost. Because he even with those carriers out, he ended up losing that expansion. And Micro obviously winning out a little bit there, but honestly, 3 Goliaths versus 3 carriers, I expect the carriers to win. I think another factor that we're kind of ignoring here is the distance between the 2 spawns. I think if XellOs had been right next to Bisu and we saw this game play out the exact same way, I think XellOs would have won, because he wouldn't have had to rally his troops as far. He would have had more Goliaths in the area. He would have probably been able. He might have been able to hunt down that dropship as well. But that's just a bit of speculation. But I think because of that distance, he couldn't reinforce with the Goliaths needed, and therefore Bisu took the game.
Right, I think I did mention the base issue in terms of the push during the game, but I'm sure we have, as you're right, we haven't discussed it post game.
Yeah,
but,
well, I just mean right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But coming back to again, XellOs' decision making and Bisu's decision making. I mean, you're right. The better you are, the luckier you tend to get. But I mean, how much did luck play a factor in XellOs not anticipating those carries? I mean, he must have had some sort of inkling with Bisu walling off behind those 2 gates and not doing any sort of harass and not doing anything. Bisu wasn't just going to be sitting there doing nothing. He must have had some sort of inkling that at some point carriers were coming. So should he have, should he have thought to push earlier, or should he have thought to try and get a scout in and confirm whether or not I mean, was that a luck factor that he just didn't anticipate or see the carriers at all, or was that just poor play?
I think it was a more of a mistake on XellOs' part. He's going for the economic advantage, and then he continued to try to do that 2-pronged harass, where he was harassing with the vultures and the drop simultaneously. And I think that was where Bisu really ended up winning the match, because first of all, he minimized that harass very effectively, didn't lose any of his gas-producing drones, didn't lose many drones in general, managed to stave his front because of that defensive reaver. And basically that was time where XellOs wasn't producing troops he was producing essentially for a harass instead of kind of a crushing blow. And I think that was the difference. If he had instead been producing tanks and Goliaths at that point, there's no way Bisu could have kept up, and by the time his carriers are up, there would have been a gigantic Goliath force just waiting for him. I really feel, especially with that distance, that harass was ill-advised, and I think that was the turning point, in my opinion, and that's essentially what allowed Bisu to come back and win.
I agree the harass was poor. I think probably what cost XellOs the game in the end was the lateness of his push with his tags. I think that push just came too late. If he pushed up a little bit earlier, he could have put Bisu under more pressure.
I think if instead of doing sorry to interrupt. I think if instead of going for that harass, instead he had just built a few more tanks and pushed, he would have won. Is really what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, I mean, the earlier he'd pushed, the earlier he would have forced Bisu to reveal his carriers. Bisu had pretty much almost 4 carriers up by the time that third expansion went down, and at that point, XellOs just didn't have enough Goliaths. And I think the fact that Bisu could hide his carriers for so long definitely played into it. So I'm going to come back to that scouting question. I mean, XellOs essentially was happy enough to play a blind game, yet he did not seem to have the game sense to be able to actually play that blind game. So he was sort of playing beyond himself, as it were. He didn't have the game sense to anticipate those carriers, which I think he had enough information. If he really thought about it, if he was really on top of his game, I think a better Terran player had enough information there to guess that carriers were coming sooner rather than later, and would have made more of an effort to either A, scout, or B, or get a ComSat up and get a scout in that way, or just push earlier. I suppose losing the Wraith was a big blow to him there. He maybe he was sending that Wraith into scout, and he saw the shuttle and decided to go after the shuttle, and then it got sniped by the Dragoons. And if that Wraith had survived and had seen those stargates earlier, it would have been an entirely different game. But I mean, how willing was XellOs to play blind there, and can Terran players afford to do that if they clearly don't know what the Protoss is doing?
Yeah, really, that does emphasize the importance of ComSat and why you need it. But even if he did have ComSat, let's say he scans a secondary, he's not going to see those carriers being built. Bisu had positioned it just perfectly. And that's another artifact of Katrina, I think, is because you can spread your base out with such great distance in between the two spawns, or I should say in between the protected expansion and your main base. It really makes it harder for that ComSat to be effective. You can deny information much easier. And really, I think you're right. XellOs didn't play very well, which is surprising to me because usually he's very good with his timing, very good with his game sense, especially against other Terran players. I guess less so in Protoss, as we've seen with this loss against Bisu and prior losses in last season's MSL. But yeah, I'm still surprised that while he was in the dark, instead of just I guess what he was hoping to do is while he was in that harass to continue expanding. And I think he just may have gotten a little too greedy there, and as a result, perhaps that's what would cost it. I think he was thinking more about an economic victory instead of, and what ended up happening is lost to tech, lost to the carriers in the long run.
Right. I mean, StarCraft is finely balanced. If you choose to expand your economy, it's the risk of having fewer units earlier on. If you choose to tech, it's at the risk of having weaker economy late game. And that's what StarCraft's all about: calculating what your opponent is doing and adapting accordingly. And XellOs just seemed to completely miscalculate on that. And I guess you're right. I have to agree about the scout. That perhaps the scout wasn't as much of a factor as overall game sense. I mean, with the added difficulty of scouting on Katrina, even if he'd had the comp scat and gotten a couple of scans off, he would have maybe seen the Reaver build in the main, would have seen the secondary with nothing in it, and therefore would not have seen the carriers from that. So really, it still came down to XellOs not being able to anticipate the carriers or take the initiative in the game from the information that he had. And I really do feel that he had information. I mean, do you disagree with me on that? That he didn't have enough information from everything that was going on to anticipate some sort of fast-ish carriers coming from Bisu?
I definitely think he should have predicted it, and I definitely think there's no excuse for him being behind and not having kind of something to compensate for it. Both those points I agree with. I just think I don't know. I don't know if we're giving XellOs enough credit here. I think XellOs just got a little greedy here and was going for the economic win and ended up paying for it. I think the issue is he had that third expansion up. He had 3 bases, and then he went for that 4th base in the bottom left-hand corner. And I think really that's what seemed kind of unacceptable to me. If you're already 1 base ahead of a Protoss player, you might as well just go forward and end it, especially when you know you're going to have to take out his 3rd expansion on your way into his base. But I'm not XellOs, and honestly, he's a much better player than I am, so not a pro gamer. And I'm sure we're going to get lots of comments on this analysis from lots of other people. I actually want to hear a lot of people's opinions on this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting what you guys out there think about the way XellOs played. I have to say, after having watched him play against Jangbi, I think it's just more of the same. He just played a very defensive, slow game, trying to expand and turtle, and it didn't work out for him then. It didn't work out for him now, and I just think it was essentially poor play is what it boils down to. I did have a few other questions, but I think we've actually covered them in the course of our analysis, so I don't think there's any point reiterating over it. So I'm essentially done here in terms of the points I have to make, unless there's something else you'd like to add about this game, Diggity.
The only thing I have to add is I don't know if this is XellOs at his best form. Usually XellOs has excellent game sense, but maybe this is just him faltering as of late, especially after that MSL loss. I think his mental state may not be up to par as it usually is. Really, the only last thing I want to re-emphasize is I really want to keep an eye on the next couple Protoss versus Terran matches, and I would not be at all surprised in the next 10 matches between Protoss versus Terran, we're just going to see 2 factory pushes from Terran players, resulting in fast Terran victories.
I think you're probably right. It was, whatever said and done, I think it was an exciting game, and I don't know if it was that whether XellOs was sloppy, but certainly Bisu looked relatively sharp there despite his disheveled appearance. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Bisu can come up with against the other players in his group. And I think having taken this win, Bisu is in with a good chance of progressing through to the next round. So that's something exciting to look forward to. But that's pretty much it from us here for this game. This is Klazart with Diggity and a hastily gone Moletrap. Thanks for listening, guys.